This is Dr. Marc Ellis with the Georgia Chiropractic Neurology Center, and I would like to talk to you all today about questions that I answer on a daily basis regarding post-concussive syndrome. These questions are related to confusion that people have, and the people that are having it, interestingly, are the person with the concussive syndrome as well as their family members. And unfortunately, for many people, they have been told that they have stress, that they have anxiety, that the symptoms that they're experiencing are all in their head. And I'm here to tell you that that is true. They're all in your head, but they are physiological. And I'd like to explain that because so many people are left with despair and emptiness because they're told that they need to relax and calm down. Many of their physicians have told them they've never heard of these types of symptoms before, and it leads to the person not knowing what to do. So what is happening? Well, number one, the person suffering from the concussion themselves doesn't actually know what's happening to themselves. They're experiencing strange symptoms, and very frequently they've been told that it's all in their head, and they're trying to come to a resolution. They're trying to get a hold of their thoughts and calm themselves down, but their body is doing things that they are not used to. They will get anxious. They will get nauseous at the same time. Well, the nausea centers and the anxiety centers in the brain are located right next to each other. So if you think about it, many people who get anxious get nauseous and pass out. Or people will get nauseous and then they'll get anxious and they'll pass out. Why does that happen? Because physiologically, in your lower area of your brainstem, your nausea centers, your anxiety centers, and areas that control digestion and heart rate and blood pressure are all together. So I'm here to tell you that for those people who are having troubles in that part of their brain, you're not crazy. That is what is happening. And for family members who can't understand it, please work to understand it, that neurophysiologically, this is what happens in that part of the brain. Now, what else is associated with injuries to the lower brainstem? Balance disorders. So people will very frequently feel off balance, but they don't always manifest as tripping or falling or stumbling or hitting into walls, but they manifest as strange, disoriented feelings where they don't quite have control of their body. They'll get symptoms that are similar to what is called maldebarkment syndrome, where they just feel this swaying back and forth in their body and they just don't feel right. Or they will get overt dizziness. They could be very, very extreme, where they're spinning and their world is spinning. But usually when people have that level of symptomatology, some doctor is going to be able to try to help them to understand it. As we move up through the brainstem, we'll go up to the higher brainstem, which is called your midbrain or your mesencephalon. And if you get a concussion that affects your midbrain and mesencephalon, these can be very, very, very severe, and they can be associated with personality changes. So the mesencephalon has your primary centers for dopamine productions, and it has primary centers for controlling the input of light and sound into your body, and it has a primary centers for stopping movement and stopping thought, particularly thought associated with stress and anxiety. So what happens when people get a concussion that affects their midbrain? They can get tremors. They can get emotional outbursts. They can get severe light and sound sensitivity. So as light comes in or sound comes in, they get startle responses, even to frequently light and sound that is not that loud because they're not able to filter the information. So if you're suffering with a concussion that affected your midbrain or your mesencephalon, or you or a loved one is suffering with this type of a concussion, understand the person's going to be light sensitive, sound sensitive, they may have tremors, they may get twitches in their body that they never had before, and that area of the brain will activate your sympathetic nervous system sometimes, and so the people might be sweaty and jittery. And that would be associated with an injury in the upper brainstem. Now, your cerebrum is divided up into different lobes of the brain. You have a frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. And if you have a concussion or you end up with a post-concussive syndrome, you can have symptoms associated with those different areas. So let's take a look at the frontal lobe. Well, the frontal lobe is the area of the brain that deals with executive function. It deals with problem solving and thinking. It is also the area of our brain that controls, what would we say, our impulsivity or our stress responses. The thing that when you think, oh, I want to do something not so smart, like punch a wall, and then your frontal lobe says, no, don't do that, that's not good. Or you want to drive very, very fast, and your frontal lobe says, don't do that. It's one of the reasons that males have higher car insurance. What we think is because their frontal lobes develop slower than females, so they're a little more impulsive when they're young and they do more crazy things. So if you think of that, the frontal lobe is supposed to control that and help you solve problems. Well, people who get these injuries, they can't think well, and it actually physically fatigues them. So every time they're asked to do something that requires thought, particularly at work or in school, they become tired and they lose control of their emotional brain. They can become irritable, and they very frequently might begin to make bad decisions about what to do in life because they have this injury in their frontal lobe and it's not working correctly. But you ask them what they're experiencing, but the part of their brain that would try to explain it is the part that's injured. So it's extremely difficult for them to try to explain it. They get what is called foggy thinking. This is one of the number one things that we look at for this particular area. So the person might get foggy thinking, exhausted when they have to think, exhausted when they have to read, problem solve. Then the part of their brain that controls their emotions will not work quite as well, and very often they'll make some bad decisions. Now, as we move a little bit further back into the brain, we go to the parietal lobe. And the parietal lobe, its primary functions are to tell you where your body is in space and tell you where space is in reference to you. So the reason you know where your hand is because electrical messages go from nerves in your hand and they go up into your parietal lobe, and your parietal lobe understands where your hand is and where your elbow is and where your shoulder is, where your foot is. Where are you? And it takes information from light and sound and it integrates that information to help you know also where is your world. So where am I? Where is the door? Where is the window? Where are my family members? And how do I interact with my world? So people with parietal lobe injuries can get very strange feelings in their body. They can't describe them very well. And oftentimes they're extremely disoriented. So they'll be disoriented and you go, oh, what's wrong? You know, what hurts you? What bothers you? You go, I don't really know what it is. It's something. They may feel jittery inside. So they'll have this generalized disorientation. They don't realize it, but they might actually think that they're sitting here. So I'm sitting here and I'm talking to a camera right now, and I know where I am, I know where my camera is. But what happens is they could be sitting here and they might think the camera is over here. So they're talking over here and one part of their brain is focusing over here, but another part of the brain actually realizes that their camera or their family member's over here. And they become disoriented because they don't actually realize that they don't perceive where they are or where their world is. So if that's happening with a family member, you'll see it. They'll just seem disoriented and spatially off. They might drop things more often. Why did you drop the fork? I don't know. If they're not thinking about what they're doing in regards to holding a glass or moving, they might become more inefficient with it. So these are things with parietal lobe injuries. Whether you might know some people who have that problem even though they didn't have a concussion, but when they get concussions, it can become very scary. Just imagine what it would be like to not know where you are in space, or not really realize where walls are or doors are. It's extremely disorienting. Now, moving a little bit further back, we go to the occipital lobe. And our occipital lobe's our primary visual processing center. And so what it does is it takes light in from our eyes, and it processes that light, and then it sends that information to other parts of the brain that help to make a picture, so we can recognize what is a camera, or what is a door, or what is my hand. So people with occipital lobe problems very often will see flashing lights. They might have double vision. They might have problems with depth perception. Images just might not be as crisp as normal. They might not be able to send that information to the other areas of the brain to process it. And when they go to the optometrist and they get an examination, nothing's going to be wrong with their eyes. So they'll say, oh, well, your eyes are fine. Just relax. Just relax, and your world won't look so funny. But that can be a problem with the occipital lobe, and there are treatments that can help to resolve that. And so one of the other areas that we have is the temporal lobe. So this is on the side of your head, and this area is associated with emotionality, facial recognition, memory. It integrates smell. It integrates sound. And it's associated with imagination. So when the temporal lobe gets injured, these can be very, very, very scary, because it's sort of like the Alice in Wonderland type of syndrome, where the person might have some visual hallucinations, or some sound hallucinations, or smell or taste. Oftentimes they might taste metal or taste blood. Actually is very frequent for people. If you have that, if you're watching this video and you randomly taste blood or smell metal or taste metal, you're not crazy. It's common. It happens to a lot of people with head injuries, where the temporal lobe just has an increased activity in it, and you might smell some things or hear some things or taste some things that aren't really there. And if one of your loved ones has got a head injury that affects their temporal lobe, they might be so self-conscious they never share it with you, because they might see things moving that aren't really there, or hear little noises that aren't really there. They become very self-conscious. It's very, very scary. How do you know maybe if temporal lobes are going on? Well, oftentimes those people will have problems with their memory. So if they can't remember faces so well, or they have difficulty with word retrieval, it is possible that they have a temporal lobe injury. Their emotionality can change. Emotionality is associated with most parts of the brain, so you'll see those changes, but that can happen. They can become, well, they could go any direction. They could become more depressed or more labile, or they could become more manic. It just doesn't, it depends on what happens. But if you're looking at one of your loved ones and you're going, hey, what's going on? Well, they might be feeling and experiencing some things that are very disconcerting for them. These can be improved. They can be treated. You just need to be able to realize that they had an injury to their temporal lobe, and you have to know how to do therapeutic interventions that are going to help that region of the brain. So another very important thing, so we've gone through the different areas of the brain. We looked at the lower brainstem, we looked at the upper brainstem, we looked at frontal lobe and temporal lobe and occipital lobe and parietal lobe. And if you're looking through and you're going, I have this and that and this and that, but yours is not focused to really one of the areas, what you want to remember is that people are entitled to more than one area to be injured. So very frequently, people will have injuries in multiple regions of their brain. And the last one that we discussed but didn't point out is the cerebellum, and it primarily controls balance and coordination of movement, but it is also related to activating and integrating with all the different parts. So when we look at concussions, originally we would just say, oh, someone had a concussion. Now they're starting to name them differently. So now you can have a concussion that affects executive functioning. Well, which part of the brain do you think that mostly does? It's probably mostly an injury with the frontal lobe. People can have concussions that affect visual processing. Well, what area could that be? That can be areas that control vision. Cerebellum does it, or the occipital lobe. People can have concussions that are associated with emotionality. So those can be your midbrain or your temporal lobe, where they get outbursts of emotionality. People can have concussions that are associated with balance disorders. So where can those be? Those can be down in the cerebellum, like we talked about, but they can also be up in the parietal lobe, and you have to know which one is which. So the cerebellum might be doing what it's being told to do, but the parietal lobe might not know where the person is. So they can do that. And then there are pain syndromes, and pain is pretty complex, and it can be in all the different parts of the brain, or maybe an injury from, say, a whiplash or something. So those are the different types of concussions. Those are symptoms that go with them. And I hope that this video is able to allow people with concussions to better understand that's really happening to you, even if doctors don't understand it. It's all textbook. It's in books. And I hope that it helps family members to be more understanding and more supportive, and be able to reach out to their family members and their loved ones and be able to help them more. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email to office@healthybrainnow.com, and we'll see if we can help answer some of those questions for you as well. We'll also be continuing to put out more information, and we'll try to get these up on our website, which is healthybrainnow.com, and just continue to support people out there who are suffering from post-concussive syndromes or vestibular disorders or other things that are associated with dysregulation of brain function. Thank you for your time.